Welcome to the latest episode of the Business English podcast. In this episode, we'll be discussing a topic that's familiar to anyone who has worked in the business environment: deadlines. Now, deadlines are an integral part of any professional's life, whether they are self-imposed or dictated. Managing them and talking about them is a skill which professionals must become acquainted with. Using general English expressions to negotiate an extension or try and explain that you may miss, or worse, have missed a deadline is more than likely not going to cut it. So, whether you're working on a project, preparing a report, or closing a deal, deadlines are a fact of life in the world of business. But how can you talk about deadlines effectively in English? What is some common vocabulary associated with deadlines that you need when conversing with colleagues, clients, or managers? How can you negotiate extensions, manage competing priorities, and deal with the stress and pressure of tight deadlines? But perhaps most importantly, how do we talk about those deadlines that we are going to miss or have missed? In this episode, we'll be exploring these questions and more, and sharing some practical tips and phrases for mastering the language of deadlines in business English. So, whether you are a seasoned professional or just starting out in your career, join us as we get into the infamous world of deadlines and learn how to use the right professional language even when the pressure is on. But first, our friendly neighborhood intro. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Business English podcast, helping professionals communicate more effectively, more confidently, and with impact. With your host, Rob, from Energetic English. Let's get down to business. As we briefly outlined during our introduction, we will be covering many aspects of dealing with deadlines. But just to get you in the mood and to orientate us nicely toward the painful subject of deadlines, I want to discuss some general outline vocabulary. These are phrases that you will more than likely encounter when discussing deadlines in one way or another. Pay careful attention to the verbs that are being used in conjunction with each phrase, as these subtleties in verb usage can make all the difference, as I'm sure you are all very much aware. As usual, I'll repeat each phrase twice before pausing for you to drill it, take note, or do what you need to do. The magic pause is there for you, so make use of it as best you can. Right, here are 21 phrases you can use when talking about deadlines. 1. Set a deadline. Set a deadline. Set a deadline is to establish a date or time by which something must be completed. 2. Miss a deadline. Miss a deadline. To fail to complete a task by the predetermined deadline. 3. Push back a deadline. Push back a deadline. To delay a deadline to a later date or time. 4. Bring forward a deadline. Bring forward a deadline. To move a deadline to an earlier date or time. 5. Work towards a deadline. Work towards a deadline. To focus on completing a task before the deadline. 6. Looming deadline. Looming deadline. A deadline that is approaching quickly and causing anxiety, perhaps. 7. Meet or hit a deadline. Meet or hit a deadline. To successfully complete a task before the deadline. 8. Extend a deadline. Extend a deadline. To increase the amount of time available to complete a task. 9. Race against the deadline. Race against the deadline. To work quickly and efficiently in order to complete a task before the deadline. 10. Blow a deadline. Blow a deadline. To fail to meet a deadline, often due to procrastination or lack of preparation. 11. Tight deadline. Tight deadline. A deadline that is close and leaves a little room for error. 12. Imminent deadline. Imminent deadline. A deadline that is coming up soon and is causing concern. 13. Flexible deadline. Flexible deadline. A deadline that can be adjusted or changed as needed. 14. Enforcer deadline. Enforcer deadline. To make sure that a deadline is adhered to and not ignored. 15. Deadline pressure. Deadline pressure. The stress and urgency caused by a deadline. 16. Deadline extension. Deadline extension. The act of prolonging the amount of time available to complete a task. 17. Deadline driven. Deadline driven. A work environment or task that is defined by a sense of urgency and the need to meet deadlines. 18. Deadline management. Deadline management. The process of planning and scheduling work in order to meet deadlines. 19. Deadline reminder. Deadline reminder. A communication that reminds individuals of a deadline and the consequences of missing it. 20. Deadline flexibility. Deadline flexibility. The ability to adjust deadlines as needed to accommodate changing circumstances. 21. Deadline oriented. Deadline oriented. A mindset or approach that emphasizes the importance of meeting deadlines in order to achieve success. Familiarizing yourself with these phrases will help you deal with the subject of deadlines when they arise at work and allow you to navigate that discussion more easily. Using these phrases will help you more clearly articulate a more precise definition of what you need to say instead of trying to use general English expressions. Okay, with what I hope is a sufficiently whet appetite, we can now move on to the next section regarding deadlines. The nerve-wracking subject of negotiating an extension. Now, deadlines are a funny thing, really. They are things that nobody really wants in their life, but when they are present, they can contribute to a more optimized forward movement, putting the individual or individuals under pressure, if nothing else. Hitting a predetermined deadline can sometimes be unachievable, however, for a variety of factors. Regardless of what they are, the end result is still the same. You need to negotiate an extension in a professional and effective way. So, here are 10 phrases that will allow you to do just that. 1. Is it possible to extend the deadline by a few days? Is it possible to extend the deadline by a few days? 2. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we're requesting an extension to the deadline. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we're requesting an extension to the deadline. 3. We're committed to completing the project on time, but we may need a bit more time to do so. Can we discuss a new deadline? We're committed to completing the project on time, but we may need a bit more time to do so. Can we discuss a new deadline? 4. We understand the importance of meeting the original deadline, but we're encountering some unexpected challenges. Can we request an extension? We understand the importance of meeting the original deadline, but we're encountering some unexpected challenges. Can we request an extension? 5. We'll be able to deliver a better quality product if we have a bit more time. Can we discuss a new deadline? We'll be able to deliver a better quality product if we have a bit more time. Can we discuss a new deadline? 6. We'd like to request an extension on the deadline in order to ensure that all the necessary steps are taken to meet the project's requirements. We'd like to request an extension on the deadline in order to ensure that all the necessary steps are taken to meet the project requirements. 7. We believe that with an extension on the deadline, we'll be able to produce a better outcome for all parties involved. We believe that with an extension to the deadline, we'll be able to produce a better outcome for all parties involved. 8. We'd like to propose a new deadline that takes into account the unexpected challenges we've faced. We'd like to propose a new deadline that takes into account the unexpected challenges we've faced. 9. We're committed to meeting the project's goals and objectives, but we need more time to do so. Can we negotiate a new deadline? We're committed to meeting the project's goals and objectives, but we need more time to do so. Can we negotiate a new deadline? 10. We'd like to request an extension on the deadline in order to provide additional research and analysis that we believe is necessary. We'd like to request an extension on the deadline in order to provide additional research and analysis that we believe is necessary. So, with this collection of phrases, you will be able to more effectively negotiate that all-important extension to your deadline, whatever the reason may be. But what if negotiating a deadline simply isn't an option, and you know for certain that you will ultimately miss it? What can we do or say in this situation, I hear you ask? Well, you are in luck. In the next section, we will be laying out phrases for you to use when you miss that all-important deadline. Okay, in this section, we will be outlining 10 phrases for you to use when you have missed or will miss a deadline. But before we jump into those phrases, remember that in addition to the correct phrases, you must deliver them in the correct manner. Essentially, it is not what you say, but how you say it. So before looking at those phrases, let's think about how to deliver them in the most effective way. So here are 5 tips on delivering the slightly sensitive topic of missing a deadline. 1. Be honest. Admit that you will miss the deadline and explain why. Be clear about the reasons for the delay, such as unexpected roadblocks or unforeseen issues that arose. 2. Be proactive. Offer a plan of action for how you will rectify the situation. This could include proposing a new deadline or offering alternative solutions to meet the original deadline. 3. Communicate early. Don't wait until the very last minute to notify the relevant parties. Inform them as soon as you realize you will miss the deadline so that they can adjust their own plans accordingly. 4. Be respectful. Show empathy for the impact your delay may have on others, and be willing to listen to their concerns or suggestions. And 5, of course, follow up. After delivering the news, make sure to follow up with the updates on your progress towards meeting the new deadline or implementing alternative solutions. This helps build trust and maintain open lines of communication. Right, with those tips on the delivery and process in place, let's now look at those 10 phrases that you can use when missing a deadline. 1. Unfortunately, we won't be able to meet the deadline. Unfortunately, we won't be able to meet the deadline. 2. We're experiencing unexpected delays and won't be able to meet the deadline. We're experiencing unexpected delays and won't be able to meet the deadline. 3. I'm afraid we're going to miss the deadline. I'm afraid we're going to miss the deadline. 4. We need to request an extension on the deadline. We need to request an extension on the deadline. 5. We're encountering some difficulties that are preventing us from meeting the deadline. We're encountering some difficulties that are preventing us from meeting the deadline. 6. We'll need more time to complete the project and won't be able to meet the original deadline. We'll need more time to complete the project and won't be able to meet the original deadline. 7. We underestimated the time required to complete the task and will miss the deadline. We underestimated the time required to complete the task and will miss the deadline. 8. We need to discuss a new deadline to make sure we can deliver that project successfully. We need to discuss a new deadline to make sure we can deliver the project successfully. 9. We apologize for missing the deadline and are taking steps to ensure it doesn't happen again. We apologize for missing the deadline and are taking steps to ensure it doesn't happen again. 10. We'll provide regular updates on our progress to make sure that we meet the new deadline. We'll provide regular updates on our progress to make sure we meet the new deadline. Now, through the use of these phrases and aforementioned techniques, you will be able to deliver the difficult news of missing a deadline in the most professional and effective manner. So that's all for today's episode on dealing with deadlines, where we have been exploring the language and techniques of addressing deadlines in the world of business. Remember, whether you're facing a tight deadline, negotiating an extension, or simply trying to manage your time more effectively, the language that you use can make a big difference in how you communicate your message. So keep practicing, keep learning, and keep pushing yourself. Thanks for listening, and that's us. You have been listening to the Business English Podcast. Remember to subscribe, leave a review, and we'll see you next time.